What's going on, guys? Failed to listen. Welcome back. And you just gotta accept the facts. And the fact of the matter is this. This video is about GTA 4 backwards compatibility on the Xbox One. Just a little bit about backwards compatibility in general versus PlayStation 4 games, whether you're talking about exclusives or multi-platform games, and I think you can include the PC and the Nintendo Switch in this conversation. And I'm not saying that the Nintendo Switch is going to have a crazy launch or anything, and there's going to be tons of high budget Nintendo only IPs or something right there. But I think in, say, a year and a half, 2 years, we'll be having a much different conversation about that first party and third party exclusives on the Nintendo Switch. But getting right into it, man, backwards compatibility is not a bad thing. Backwards compatibility is actually a great thing, in my opinion. I mean, it's part of the reason it's so awesome on PC, right? Along with all of the other freedoms. Just knowing that I'll be able to play most of these games forever, and if there's, some issue at some point, compatibility and the like, I mean, the community will fix it or the developer will fix it, and I'll still be good to go. Some of these multiplayer games, while they won't have the same numbers they have today, some of these games will never die. The community, if it's strong enough, will still be there, and they'll support and play these games for, 5 to 10 years or more to come. And that's excellent. I like that. Backwards compatibility is not a bad thing, but I think in the case of Xbox One, GTA 4 is a great game. Some of these other backwards compatible games that they've released on Xbox One, that's awesome. Some of those are great games. Some of them my favorite of last generation. They'd make like the top 50 or something. But it's too little too late. If this had been something that was there at the start of the generation for Xbox One or PlayStation 4 or both, that would have been awesome. Huge advantage for Microsoft if they would have been able to keep the price down and not force Connect on everyone, because again, everyone knows the story. I mean, it's $400 for the more powerful console and you want $500 for the less powerful console. But something like backwards compatibility being there, maybe gamers would have considered the Xbox One a little bit more. But I mean, you got to keep it real, man. Microsoft lost probably millions of customers to Sony and the PlayStation 4. I mean, you just got to accept the facts. And I think, Xbox only gamers and some of these fanboys want to live in denial, but it's just not enough. It probably would have been a big deal at launch, especially if they could have matched the PlayStation 4 price, because then you're the same price. Yeah, you're a little bit less powerful, but you're the same price, and you can play maybe 150, 200 games from the Xbox 360 along with these Xbox One games. And guess what? We're going to add 5 to 10 games, Xbox 360 games, to the backwards compatibility program each month. I mean, that would have been huge. Something like that would have been awesome, but that's just not the case. That's a what if scenario, versus reality. Expectations of what maybe should have happened versus reality, and that's where we're at with the Xbox One. You guys know, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Exclusive games, they're just not as relevant as they once were. They just don't mean as much anymore. I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, you'll have stuff like Uncharted or The Last of Us, or, God of War has been excellent. Some of my favorite games in the past, those God of War games have been excellent. I don't know about this new one. Gonna keep an open mind. I'm hoping the next time I see God of War, I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a God of War game. That's what I hope to take away from the next gameplay we see for that game. But, Microsoft, they don't really have any teams. They don't really have any games that can really match up with those. They damn sure come on, man. Last of Us was a big game. I mean, I like Uncharted more, but The Last of Us was a big game. It won tons of awards. It was the most awarded game of all time until The Witcher 3 came out and crushed that. But the fact of the matter is, it was an excellent game. It sold extremely well. So The Last of Us 2, that is one of those exclusives that probably will move some units and get some of those people that were on PS3 and 360 okay, so Last of Us 2 is coming out. I'm definitely moving into the current generation. That's one of those games that can do that. Uncharted 4, kind of the same thing. It was a bundled game. That's not me taking anything away from Uncharted 4 and its sales numbers, but it was bundled. Like you have to say that when you start talking about the sales numbers. And Sony's just done a really good job this generation with, their marketing for the PlayStation 4 in general, and some of these, more well-known multi-platform games like Destiny. A lot of gamers, because the majority of gamers just don't really bother to do research. That's the fact of the matter. A lot of gamers probably thought Destiny was a PlayStation-only game or something, because it was heavily marketed for PlayStation. I mean, I think they had the white PlayStation with the Destiny logos or whatever. I mean, like that was a big deal. That was a huge game, and that community is still going strong. Rumor has it that Destiny 2 is coming out as soon as this year. So, Sony's probably got that locked up as well. And you just have to look at like when you look at, I did a video a while back, when you look at like the top 20, top 30, 40 games, the majority of those are multi-platform games. And you look at the Xbox One, kind of the same deal, Nintendo is the exception, but we won't get into that. Multi-platform games are just killing it. Like those are the, your GTAs, your Destinies, your Battlefields and stuff like that. Like that's why consoles are selling in, continuing here into the early part of 2017. But when you look at it, Xbox One, it feels, it's not dead, but it feels dead. There just isn't a lot of buzz. There isn't really a lot of news or anything happening, good or bad, when it comes to the Xbox One. So you got a Kingdom Hearts game that just recently released, I think, for PS4. Neo just came out. The game's like sold out on Amazon for like the next 2 months or something. I'm sure that'll change in like a week or two. I don't fully expect that to stay that way, but maybe I'm wrong. But I mean, even though the people that are in the minority are buying these consoles for exclusives, even though these games don't sell as well as maybe like an Uncharted or, like a Halo game or something, it's still there. Like there's still an option to play some of these titles. I think you have stuff like Nier Automata coming up at the end of the month, or maybe that's in March, but it's still a game regardless of the release date. It's still a game that people know that they're only going to be able to play on PlayStation and PC. It's just another game that Xbox isn't getting. So not only do you have the exclusives for the minority of Sony's fan base that they'll buy. I mean, they're not, obviously those games aren't going to do crazy numbers, but I mean, they do have those games, and they have the superior versions of some of the bigger multiplats. I mean, I think right off the top of my head, like what's the biggest game coming out this year that's absolutely confirmed? Probably like if Battlefront 2's coming out, maybe that. Mass Effect. But the PlayStation 4 is going to get the better versions of those games. I mean, you do have the Scorpio coming out, so maybe that won't hold true for very long, but we'll just have to wait and see. But with the PlayStation 4 being the lead platform for most developers, I mean, I can't see them making huge improvements to some of these multi-platform games that are going to come out in the first half of the year. I'm sure that Microsoft will showcase some of these titles at E3 and say, hey, look, the Scorpio is going to be able to play this game at this resolution or this frame rate or what. I'm sure they're going to do some of that. Absolutely. But I think, again, with marketing and everything, people know that you can get these exclusives and all the biggest games on the PlayStation. So what reason do I have to get an Xbox? I'm not saying that there's not value in the Xbox, because obviously people do find value in the system. It sold almost like 30 million, but I think looking at it now, it has no chance of even catching where the Xbox 360 was at the end of the generation. Damn sure not in software sales. Software sales, Xbox 360 killed the competition, and I don't see that happening this generation. Red Dead Redemption 2, I think it's pretty much a done deal that Sony's going to get the marketing for that. And a lot of people, again, because the majority of gamers don't do research, that's going to come off as a PlayStation only game. Even though Xbox is getting it, even though PC may get it at some point. I mean, just the idea, putting that in people's mind that this is a PlayStation only game. I mean, that's big for Sony, you know what I mean? And you can't deny that. I just don't know what Scorpio can do, because again, while exclusives just aren't anywhere near as relevant as they used to be, I think you gotta have a couple of games that do set the world on fire, and Sony has those with Uncharted and The Last of Us, and hopefully again God of War. Microsoft has Halo, and I'm sure the next Halo will sell very well, but I don't know if that's enough anymore. They need teams. Microsoft needs teams, man. Like, even if you're not making, games that are just exclusive to Xbox, and you still plan to bring a lot of those games to PC, you need some teams. They don't have the teams that Sony, if Sony catches wind that they're dealing with a very talented developer that can make them some excellent games, they're probably going to buy those guys up. Now, again, things change. It is what it is, but it's Microsoft. They have God's money. They have God's money. When you start comparing to Nintendo and Sony, they have God's money. There's definitely companies with more money, but it's Microsoft. You buy Skype for like $8 or $9 billion, but you can't buy some development teams or buy some well-known IPs from some of these third parties or something, and maybe even buy the teams, from those third parties. If stuff like that's a possibility, Microsoft should be taking advantage. It's just a real shame. It's a real shame. Again, the Xbox isn't dead, but it just feels dead. There isn't like a lot of life there. I don't know. Nobody's really talking about it anymore unless you're an Xbox only gamer. I don't even know why people are trying to damage control that shit anymore. The console war, if there ever was one, is over. Sony destroyed the competition in terms of hardware sales, and it doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. So what else is there to say, man? What else can Microsoft do? Maybe they need a refresh. And I don't know if Scorpio is enough for that refresh. I think they got to do a little bit more than that. So that's my video. That's my take on backwards compatibility versus exclusives and multi-platform games on some of these other platforms. And yeah, man, I mean, you guys know I'm not the biggest exclusive guy. I mean, I play more multi-plats and the occasional indie title than I do anything else. I just don't care much about exclusives. Did I mention I usually refer to my PlayStation 4 as the, Naughty Dog God of War box? I mean, that's pretty much what it is at this point, because I'm not going to be buying a lot of these Sony exclusives because I just don't care. Nintendo is the exception, I think, at least for me. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the continued support. I do appreciate it. You guys have a good one. Peace.